Yellow paint, it's something that's been taking the world by storm in video games, and it's hilarious to me. Because, one, it's funny to me just like the things that will irk the gamers you see on Twitter. And, two, because it's paint, you know? It's just paint. Like, it's just little yellow splotches in your game world, and like, huh? Why are you mad? Anyways, paint antics aside, let's go hard in the paint.
Flocka. I go hard in the motherfucking paint, nigga.
So for the uninitiated, what is the paint? Well, it's the yellow stuff I put on my genitals so the ladies know where to go.
Boo, you stink!
Nah, it's markings usually in the form of yellow paint spread across a game's map to make parts of the environment pop out more. It makes the world more seamless to explore and interact with. Usually in most games, it exists in game worlds where paint exists, you know, but it can also kind of feel like they hired some dude, like paint ahead of your game character, like they paid this dude $50 and they gave him a bucket of paint and said, anything this guy should see, cover it with paint, no matter what. And like, I can kind of get that, so paint isn't like the best thing in the world, but it's not particularly bad in my opinion. There are levels of paint, a meter, if you would, and I think games with the most paint are the more action-focused Resident Evil games. Like, the paint makes perfect sense there in my opinion because they have yellow on them and there's not a lot of yellow in the game's world. And when you're playing an action-focused Resident Evil game, you're not trying to be immersed in the world, you're trying to go shoot some zombies, roundhouse kick some dudes, punch, kick, all that good stuff. I think the thing that you'll notice the most in these games, at least the action-focused ones, so like Resident Evil 7 to an extent, and also 8 and 4 Remake, is like all these yellow barrels that they have. The ones in Resident Evil 7, for some reason, like they covered them, instead of using yellow paint, they used yellow tape, and it's like, canonically, what happened here was Mr. Baker just in there like, this box is sturdy, but I'm gonna put a little tape around it. That nasty Ethan boy out. Oh boy. Village and Resident Evil 4 Remake, they use the exact same model for these boxes and barrels. And I think they look pretty good, and they're very diegetic. And I think when you compare them to the original boxes in Resident Evil 4, like, look at these. They up the saturation on them. They all look super, like, whoa. Like, they don't look like they exist in the same world they're inhabiting, almost. And it's kind of hard for me to say, like, this is better. Like, I don't see why it's better. It's equally as noticeable. It has as much, like, poppiness to it, but it doesn't look real. Like, the people in the Resident Evil 4 universe, they have access to paint. That makes sense. Someone could have painted this. The people in the Resident Evil 4 Remake don't have the ability to, like, make wood interact with the nearby light differently, so it's, like, 12 shades brighter than everything else around it. That's weird. That doesn't make sense. In these games, they also make a bunch of ladders and key things you need to interact with or, like, shoot. They also splotch them with a bit of yellow paint to prevent players from getting lost. Another game series that does this, like, to the same extent, I'd say, are, like, the new Tomb Raider games. The newer ones have this, like, white paint on, like, all the interactable ledges, so you, the player, can know, oh, I can climb that. And it's a very helpful tip that lets the player know what parts of the world you can and cannot interact with. In a game like Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, you wouldn't want to have any paint, because if you can see it, you can most likely interact with it. Hence the lack of paint. I think the next step down in, like, painting this from Resident Evil to Tomb Raider would have to be like the Uncharted games. These games don't use paint at all, but instead they had some dude go around the whole fucking world with a piece of sandpaper. He just, like, roughed a bunch of surfaces up to make them look and feel interactable. I think it's a great call. For things that wouldn't make sense to be roughed up, it'll be like a well-placed pipe that stands out to help you comprehend where you should climb, since it's just a really great piece of visual language, which is what it's all about. Being able to see the screen and make sense of it fast. The game, on the other hand, with, like, the least amount of paint, at least from what I've played, would be like The Last of Us Part 2. There's very little visual elements baked into this game. Rather, things will have prompts on them. It's weird because, like, players would rather sometimes have, like, a big non-diegetic prompt pop up on something more than, like, a little bit of yellow paint little yellow paint splotched around, which is, like, weird. And I can kind of get on the anti-yellow paint train a bit, You know, I think in games that aren't like kind of linear action games where you're supposed to just keep going and running through it, it can kind of be a bit weird to have, you know, like a more guided experience. You know, like Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil Village, they aren't like super open, you know, but you can definitely still get lost. So that yellow paint helps keep things on track. But a game that's getting yellow paint is going to be Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 Rebirth Digital Deluxe Edition, including Sephiroth's painting class. You see, in this game, it tries to justify the inclusion of yellow paint by having Sephiroth change his backstory. Just a little bit, though. He's actually a painter now, and he's been going all around Gaia, painting the shit he wants Cloud to dingle around with yellow. It's not really in character for Sephiroth to, like, do something like this, but Square Enix decided to do a couple things different in their remake of the game, and I'm all for it. Jokes aside, it's a bit weird that a game with such an open world would have this level of paint in it. You know, I haven't seen too much of the gameplay for this game, and honestly, it's not a game I really want to play, so I'm not going to be ragging on it too much, or more than I feel like is necessary, but it's weird that an open-ended role-playing game like this would include yellow paint. Maybe the world is a lot bigger than we expect it to be, and the interactability in some of these environments isn't going to be at something like Breath of the Wild. Well, obviously it's not going to be at something like that, but it's just an interesting thought to see where interactivity in this game will land and end up at. And, like, if this is as bad as it gets, I gotta say, in all honesty, the paint is not that bad. I'm overall pro-yellow paint, because I'm fucking stupid. And I think it's a product of the modern gaming environment. It exists because players of all skill levels need to be able to beat and enjoy the video games they pay for. It also exists because a reviewer needs to basically be able to beat your game at least once, ideally multiple times, in like a week or two. They can get a review out, so game company TM can have someone make a trailer where, like, your character looks at nothing and a bunch of 10 out of 10s pop up on screen. And they're like, wow, I did it! I think the best and easiest solution for this is very apparent, and I guess Rise of Tomb Raider already did it, but just let the player turn that kind of stuff off. I generally only think a small minority of players will choose to make this change, but, like, let them make the change because it bothers them. And if they want to get lost for a bit and miss a bunch of ammo, I say good! Serves them right. But another addendum to this is, like, make it a day one patch once the game launches, because these reviewers fucking need the paint. You cannot trust them to use the paint. I can already see some reviewer turning the paint off and getting lost in the game world, and then negatively reviewing a fucking game because he or she just couldn't figure it the fuck out. Like, this is a disaster. This is a PR bomb waiting to blow up. And then some fucking GameBloog.com, you know, GameBloog, you know, GameBloog.com, they fucking pick it up and they're like, oh, I don't know where to go in this game. 4 out of 10. And then Twitter fucking blows up. Everyone's tweeting. Video game TM. We don't know where to go. And then, like, there's a whole beef happening that doesn't need to be happening. And this is all because some freelance writer working to write a review for fucking third-person looter shooter 5 was trapped in a hell dungeon at like 3 days to beat a 60-hour game, decided to turn an option off that they thought would make the game more enjoyable for them, and it did not make it more enjoyable for them. And they ruined the game. And you can't fault them for that, really, because that was their genuine experience with the game and they didn't like it. So, whatever the fuck you do not make it a thing that comes baked into the game. Do a day one patch. Patch it in, right? Put it in the game, but don't give us the option to touch it until day one, until players can play it, because these reviewers fuck you up for it. But enough about how horrible the system around video game reviews are. Let's wrap this up. Paint isn't bad, and I found myself being lost in games when I don't know where to go, or I miss something, and have thus been walking around in circles for like 20-30 minutes. And for me, a guy who really doesn't care about getting lost in a game world and can sometimes like it, I can sometimes enjoy being lost, I'll always remember being stuck in a part of a game. But for some people with less free time, being lost can be frustrating, upsetting, straight up not fun, not cool. And that is why the paint exists, to not waste someone's time. The option to turn it off might be nice, but I haven't seen any game ruined by fucking yellow paint. Not yet, at least. You know, this game could come out. There could be a lot of yellow paint. Don't get too heavy-handed with the paint. Don't go too hard in the paint.
Nigga, leave you stankin', nigga. What the fuck you thinking, nigga? I won't die for this shit or what the fuck I said. Front yard, broad day with the S. See Gucci, that's my motherfucking nigga. I hang in the jail with them hit squad killers. Walking Flocka flame on the hood ass nigga. Riding real.
Wowie zowie. This was another one. This one was a little bit more off the cuff, a little less unscripted, or a little less scripted. Words are hard. But thanks for chilling with me. If you watched the whole thing, it was a rough one. Haha. If you liked it, you should hit the like button. That'll help. If you didn't like it, don't hit the dislike button. Don't. But give me your thoughts on yellow paint. Is there a game that you wish had more yellow paint? Is there a game you wish had less yellow paint? Do you think Final Fantasy VII Rebirth Remix Divine Trinity Edition Part 2 Special Edition Limited Collectors 7 Remake will be good? Will be bad? I probably won't play it until like 3 years after it launches. So I don't know. Anyways, I'm going to go back to my dungeon. I have another one of these coming out sooner than you may think. Probably like 2 years. I'll make another one of these in 2 years. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.